Attention, you're listening to the Todd Huff Radio Show, America's home for conservative, not bitter talk radio. Be advised that the content of this program has been documented to prevent and even cure liberalism, and listening may cause you to lean to the right. Here's your conservative, but not bitter host, Todd Huff.
All right, my friends, hour 2 of today's program. It is a pleasure to be here. You have tuned in to America's home for conservative, not bitter talk, and I'm happy you're here. So, I want to continue just briefly. I found the clip. I was looking in the wrong place. We were talking about previous hour, this act of terrorism in Boulder, Colorado. There was a report on CBS News where it's kind of comical to me that the folks at CBS News had to essentially admit that Trump's policies prevent this sort of thing from happening. This sort of thing. For the people that are doing what has been done, remember to set the facts straight here, this act of terror in Boulder, Colorado was, well, allegedly initiated by a person who immigrated illegally from Egypt. He overstayed his visa. He applied for asylum and was basically allowed to stay here. That's not what would have happened if Trump was, Trump is running the show now, but here's the thing. Remember, Trump's in the process of trying to deport people who are the biggest threats to this country. And he's, of course, met with opposition from the left every single step of the way. And so he's actively trying to find these people before they do stuff like this and get them out of the country. So I want to play this clip, and then I want to get to some other things as well. This will just kind of tie up what we were talking about last hour, I should say. So that's where we're going to start, my friends. I also want to remind you, listen, we have launched Red, White, and Brand. Red, White, and Brand, it is a division of the Todd Huff Show. And we are here, the company's here to help businesses, help anyone, put their logo on almost anything, whether that is apparel, whether that is promotional products, whether those are trade show booths, banners. Truly, folks, getting your logo on almost anything is what Red, White, and Brand can help you do. And the website is now up, redwhiteandbrand.com. That's all spelled out. You cannot use an ampersand in a website. redwhiteandbrand.com. B-R-A-N-D, by the way. If you use promo code TODD while shopping there, you're going to save 10%, and you're going to get free shipping on website orders there, redwhiteandbrand.com. You can also, look, there's a ton of products. It can be overwhelming. So if you don't really know what you're looking for, reach out to us, and we will be in contact with you to help you find what you are looking for your event, for whatever you got, for your job fair, for your awards banquet, whatever the case may be. redwhiteandbrand.com, promo code TODD, get you a 10% savings, and you get free shipping on website orders. All right. Now, that being said, let me play the clip. This is CBS News talking about the White House, their reaction to what we've learned about this alleged terrorist, who we again know is from Egypt. One of the news stations, I think it was MSNBC, at first said that he was a white male, which is interesting. Normally, they don't want to tell us someone's race and gender unless, of course, it, can be used for things that are politically advantageous for the people on the left. But this was not a white male who did these things. By the way, if a white male did it, it would have been as atrocious as this. This is not complicated. This is really quite easy for people who are not totally just absorbed into the identity politics world and believe that all those things are what matter in this world instead of actual truth and justice. But nonetheless, CBS News ends up admitting here in this segment that Trump's policies would not have allowed this guy to stay here. Let's listen to this explanation. This is about 90 seconds. CBS News explaining how the Trump administration candidly would have handled this differently than the Biden administration.
Now to Nancy Cordes at the White House. So, Nancy, what is the president saying about this tonight?
Maurice, the president and the White House more generally, they're using this case to hammer the Biden administration over its immigration policies, which they are arguing enabled this suspect to stay in the country.
Of course it
in
did.
A post this morning, President Trump said acts of terrorism like this one will not be tolerated in the United States. And he said this is why we must deport illegal anti-American radicals from our homeland.
Absolutely.
Trump's deputy chief of staff, Stephen Miller, added no more hostile migration. Keep them out and send them back.
Yeah.
Suleiman entered the U.S. 3 years ago on a tourist visa, but he has applied for asylum about a month later. And some asylum cases can take 6 years to process. So he was allowed to stay here and wait.
So just let that sink in for a minute. So it's become acceptable in the minds of the media here. Now, this clip isn't over yet, but it's become acceptable to say, here's a guy that came. They left out the part. He overstayed his work visa. He's applied for asylum, and now they say it takes 6 years. 6 years for some of those cases to go through. So we just let people stay? Oh, what is this? It's people that, by the way, in his particular case, harbor incredible amounts of evil in their hearts and hate Americans, in this case, hate Jewish Americans, and have justified using violence to try to kill them. This is what we are dealing with, my friends. Why in the world is this the case? You know, it never ceases to amaze me. The left wants to use government for all sorts of things that are not constitutional, that are not part of the our framers' vision for this country. They want to do everything that's outside the scope of what the Constitution empowers them to do, and they won't do the things, in this case, manage the court system. They won't. They have no interest in actually managing the responsibilities that they have been constitutionally given to do for the American people. So she's now going to be asked questions here by the news desk. She's going to chime in, and you're going to hear her admit that Trump's policies would not have allowed this individual to be here to begin with.
Nancy, what would have happened to Solomon under Trump's policies?
Well, the Trump administration, John, has raised the asylum threshold, so he could still enter the country on a tourist visa today, but he might not be allowed to even begin the asylum process. The Biden administration also granted him a temporary 2-year work permit, so he was able to earn a living here in the U.S. while he waited for his asylum claim to be processed. And it's unlikely under Trump's immigration policies that he would have been granted that work permit.
There you go.
Nancy Cordes at the White House for us. Thank you, Nancy.
So, you know, it's a little bit aggravating when I watch this stuff happen. People's lives have been changed. People were targeted. He tried to kill people. Right? This guy has justified the taking of life in his mind. And listen, I believe, of course, if he's going to be charged criminally, by the way, this is a perfect example of where he should be given entire due process rights, the right to an attorney, the right to remain silent, not to testify against himself, all of these things that we all have as American citizens when we are charged with a crime. That everyone should get full due process, unless they decide, which I don't think at this point they will, and I'm not saying they should, But unless they decide, look, we're not going to go through that process, just deport him. But you can't deport somebody who's obviously behaved like this, because he's just going to go and try to repeat it, or try to recruit more people who are willing to do it. So, but if he was to be deported, he wouldn't get access to the same level of due process that he would in a criminal trial. He'd be given the amount of due process that is necessary for deportation, which, again, the left just simply doesn't want to understand. And more importantly, they don't want you to understand that either. But they just admitted that Trump's policies, if this guy was coming through the system today, applying for asylum today, he's already here. Trump's team is trying to get people like this out of the country, but there have been so many people here. Now, this is easy to say, well, Todd, this is on Trump's watch. Well, okay, I get that. They are actively trying to find these people, and they've been met with opposition every single step of the way. I mean, there have been judges that have tried to protect people from these proceedings. There's been judges who have directly interfered in the court proceeding, which we had an allegation of that in, Minnesota, I believe. No, maybe it was Madison, Wisconsin, I believe is where that was. Then there's a situation in New Mexico where allegedly a judge, or a former judge, was harboring someone who was here illegally, allegedly. We have Congress members going and having, Democrat showdowns with people running ICE detention facilities. That's where Congresswoman McIver has been charged with assaulting a member of ICE, physically getting involved. There's video evidence of this. So that's just a tiny little microcosm of the opposition that we are dealing with people on the left, people who believe that they're completely justified in sheltering and hiding these folks, but also interfering with federal law enforcement. That's why you see Tom Homan regularly going out there in the media and saying, listen, if you're going to interfere with our legal responsibilities, with our enforcement of the law, you're going to be charged. And they absolutely should be. And here's what happens. This is the fruit that's produced by these ridiculous immigration policies. The ridiculous immigration policies that were endorsed by, promoted by, embraced by the Biden administration. And now you've got a report. You've got even these journalists who are on the side of the left, who are against President Trump, who are opposing him at every step of the way. They admit that he would likely not have been allowed to be given an extended stay during his asylum claims, asylum seeking process. Trump is trying to fix this. Trump is trying to prevent this. There's no doubt that this has been created by the previous administrations, the Biden administration's policies on immigration. And it is truly life and death. Last hour I played a clip of an individual claiming that some Boston University professor found that 300,000 people around the world have died in the past 4 months because of DOJ's cuts to USAID. To which I say, give me something. Give me some evidence. Give me anything besides just some random, made-up statistic, factoid. It's not true. This stuff is completely bogus and ridiculous. Yet here we have an actual example of what happens when one policy, the morally bankrupt and idiotic policy that was embraced by Joseph Robinette bribery. This is what you have. This is cause and effect. This is a perfect example. This isn't theoretical. We don't need to have a tracker, just like we didn't have to have a tracker on other awful stories of women who have been attacked and raped and murdered by illegal immigrants. We don't have to have a tracker to show us some number that's being calculated based upon statistics and probabilities and estimations. These are things that are happening in real life. And the cause of this stuff is 100% obvious. This guy would not have been here. They just admitted that. If he had tried to enter under Trump's policies, they said in all likelihood he wouldn't have been here. I don't want to leave anything to chance here in case a leftist is tuned in here today. Take it easy. This is just, I mean, I'm having a little fun here when I say this, but there's also truth involved. But I want to make sure I complete the loop here and connect all the dots so that the left, the folks who have abandoned reason and logic for so long, can understand what I'm saying here. If the guy wouldn't have come in, this alleged terrorist would not have been allowed to be here under Trump's policies if he was seeking asylum since the time Trump has been president and not previously back in 2022 when Biden was president. Even the news, the leftist media says he likely would not have been here. And just to complete the circle here, if he was not here, he couldn't have carried out the crimes that he carried out, the alleged crimes, the alleged terrorist attack against Jewish folks in Boulder, Colorado over the weekend. If he wasn't here, crime wouldn't have happened. You see how that works? There's a direct correlation. It is a crazy thing. Just like if there wasn't an open and porous border over the past many years under the Biden administration, we wouldn't have had terrorists sneak in here. We wouldn't have had murderers and rapists and members of MS-13 and Tren de Aragua and all this stuff. They wouldn't have been coming through, or at least if they came through, it would have been exceptions to the rule and not the rule. These policies embraced and promoted by the Biden administration 100% have led to this. And that's important to point out. And why is it important to point out? It's not just important to point out, look, I'm not just in the business of saying this person to blame is to blame, this person should be exonerated. We need to understand the cause of this stuff so that we fix the problem, right? That's the ultimate underlying motivator here for me. It's not to say how many things can I blame the Democrats for so that it hurts them in the upcoming election. I want to expose what's going on. I want to explain the reasons that we find ourselves in these predicaments. I want to point to what the solution is. In this case, it's clear. The solution has been Trump's policies on illegal immigration and deportation. It's abundantly clear. These things would not have happened if these policies were in place when this individual tried to pull the shenanigans he tried to pull or he got away with under the previous administration. And so we have to ask ourselves, are we willing to live with that? Are we willing to live with that over, given the choice between saving people's lives, as it would be the case here with alleged terror attacks or some of these other heinous crimes, murders and rapes and so forth that have happened, that have been perpetrated allegedly by these gang members and so forth, these evildoers who've snuck across our border illegally. Given the choice between saving lives and having someone on social media call me a racist, I'll take that one. I'll take that one. And I think any person with any degree of character would choose the same. You can call me whatever you want to call me. I candidly do not care. I don't care what people, if I give them reason, legitimate reason, I care, and I should address that problem. But if there's no reason provided other than I supported Trump or Trump's policies or whatever, if that's the sole reason that someone has for calling me a name, sexist, bigot, homophobe, racist, transphobe, whatever, but if the other alternative is I allow policies to be enacted that people say, support these if you don't want to be a racist, support these if you don't want to be a transphobe, support these if you don't want to be a homophobe or whatever, but yet those policies can lead to circumstances where Americans lose their lives or are violently attacked. No, sign me up for the side that protects life. Sign me up for the side that doesn't care to be called names, so long as this nation is run with, well, the mindset that says it is the job of the government to protect its citizens. Could not care less about that. Friends, there is nothing more important than a good night's sleep. It's up there. When it comes to how we live our personal lives, how we get through our day, it is often underrated, having a good night's sleep. I have to tell you that I've gone through times where I have underrated it. I'm a guy that likes to burn the candle at both ends. I do. But I also am living under no illusion that not getting enough sleep or not having a good night's sleep, that can cause problems as well. Sleeping is how we recharge to fight the battles of the day, whatever those battles are, whether you're raising families, working hard, standing up for what's right in this great nation. That's why I love My Pillow. They've got everything you need, from their patented pillows and luxurious towels to their unbelievably comfortable slippers. Oz wears those all the time. In fact, I think she has them on now. Let's not forget, my friends, these products are made right here in the good old US of A. So you're not just buying comfort, you're supporting American jobs and American values. That's a win-win, my friends. So go to mypillow.com, use promo code Todd, and you'll save on any order that you make there at mypillow.com. So whether the products that you get are for your sleep, for your mornings, or just a little extra comfort, MyPillow has you covered. MyPillow.com, promo code Todd. Comfort, my friends, you can believe in. All right, just have a minute or so left here this segment. So there's something we're going to just kind of set up where we head from here. I want to get to something that I have alluded to for the past couple of days. CNN is finally admitting that Trump was right in saying that Americans have lost their faith in higher education, in colleges and universities, and for good reason, by the way. There's a clip that I'm going to play next segment. You're going to hear the audio, of course, of it. You're not going to see the video. They have graphics up on the screen giving you some polling data. But it is remarkable how many people in this country have been awakened to the fact that universities are teaching our kids some absolutely terrible things, that the leftists running colleges and individual classrooms, professors and so forth, are a absolute disgrace and dare I say threat to this wonderful nation. And CNN's beginning to understand why Americans have a problem with this. So I'll get to that next segment. In the meantime, I'm going to take a time out. You're listening here to Conservative Not Bitter Talk. I'm your host, Todd Huff. Back in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. For those of you listening to my voice who attended college, what was your experience like? Did you, are you from the era, or did you go to college in the time frame, or did you go to a particular part of a college, or did you attend a college where some of the problems and experiences I had back when I attended over 25 years ago, some of the problems I encountered with incredible bias and hatred towards conservatism and Christianity, did you run into that? Or was it not that big of a deal? It was always interesting to me. I was having fights in my classes on a regular basis with professors and so forth. But I had many folks who, say, would have been on the football team at Butler, who were in the School of Pharmacy or some other school and the business school, and they didn't have the same level. They didn't have any of that experience. And so a lot of it is the time frame that we attended. A lot of it might be the individual school. A lot of it might be what part of the school were we taking classes in. And if you were dealing with the radical leftist professors, you can relate. And today, listen, it was bad 25, 30 years ago when I went. But I would go as far to say that it is off the charts now as far as how bad it has gotten. It's to the point where, listen, I remember as a young man, I used to listen, to Dave Ramsey, and he, one of the things he talks about is saving money, for your kids to go to college if you can do that. And I think he shared some of his thoughts on, when someone graduates high school, do they go to college? How important is college? I'm going to say this. I don't know if I'm in the minority on this or not, but I'm going to say this. I'm to the point where I really believe this. Our job as parents, is to, listen, you don't want to insulate your child from the world, right? That doesn't do them any good, but you also don't want to throw them to the wolves, especially when they're younger. Part of, I guess, parenting at its core, if I can say this, is preparing your kid to be able to survive in the world without you. And so there's going to have to be a point where there's some tough lessons and some, they're going to have to meet the cold, hard realities of the world. But you also don't want to send them out there unequipped. You also don't want to send them out there naive as to the level of the threat. And I got to be honest, unless a kid, I'll just say my kid, is doing something, pursuing a career that is very specific to, a very specific route that requires a college education. You're going to have a really hard time selling me that it's even a good thing for a lot of kids today. And a lot of people today think that that's, part of, the process of becoming an adult. I don't know. I don't see it that way at all. I see some of these kids who graduate high school, go to trade school, or go to become an apprentice and are making incredible money by the time they're 20 years old, maybe 18 or 19 years old. And listen, you're not stealing something from your kids by not funding their going to college, or if you're a younger person listening to me. There are things that college prepared me for. I had to defend my ideas every day, but I also was 100% unimpacted by some of the forces and the pressures there. I wasn't going to any of these fraternity parties. One time, the whole football team, the coaches, we went. They made us go because I had no interest. I had zero interest. They made us go to a fraternity house, which I got to say, I know some people did that life, and that's fine, but it just wasn't for me. That stuff didn't appeal to me whatsoever. But there's a lot of bad things that can happen in college. There's people who think that college is a period of time in your life when you should be able to engage in all sorts of debauchery and just wicked behavior, and then you settle down. That's crazy talk to me. Absolute crazy talk. Combine that with the fact that there are people, professors, I had them 25 years ago. They still exist there today. There's more today. These professors who believe it is their job to essentially indoctrinate our young people away from what is good and true, conservative, say Christian values, conservative principles. Get that out of the kids' heads and get them to become little leftists. I'm telling you, these people exist. They are hell-bent in their desire to do this, and there's a lot of them. And they enlist the help of certain students who willingly go along with this crap because they've completely bought into the lie. Anyway, it's a mess. It is an absolute mess. And I would think, listen, I really think, I do, and again, it's individual choices. I'm not saying that it's always wrong or anything like that, but what I am saying is that I think most of the time it's not necessary. I think there's at least the traditional college experience. I don't know. I think that the cons way outweigh the pros. in most cases. There's always examples of things where that's not the case. It's not a universal truth, but there's a lot of risk, and there's a lot of... I've seen people that have sent their kids off to college never to see that kid that they sent away come back home. Literally, they changed and never looked back in a very bad way. So college, again, there's other ways, especially today with some of these online schools and other commuter schools, where it's just a different environment. But there's a lot of pitfalls hanging out there during those college years. Anyway, with that being said, here is a clip that I want to play for you on CNN, where CNN has suddenly realized that what Trump's saying about the, higher education and how it's a threat or a danger or not a good thing, how it's being run by these leftists, it's becoming obvious to more and more people. And CNN is just now starting to agree with this or understand
I think a lot of Americans thought that higher ed needed a nice kick in the rear end. What am I talking about here? Well, why don't we take a look at high confidence in higher education?
This is Harry Inton.
You go back a decade ago, 57% of Americans had high confidence in higher education. Look at where we are now. That number has plummeted as of last year, down to 36%.
Okay, so you can't see the graphic, but he said there was a poll that's conducted here. I don't know if it was, I think it's a CNN poll. And they found that just 9 years ago, in 2015, percentage of Americans who had high confidence in higher education was 57%. That's over half. That's almost 3 out of every 5 people. By the way, I would have not been in that group then. Now, however, the numbers 9 years later have plummeted to 36%. But think about what has happened even in the past 9 years. Remember, 9 years ago, that was before Trump. That was before, these anti-Trump lunatics engaged in some of their behavior. That was before some of these safe spaces. This was before... If it was during the white fragility, white guilt sort of stuff, sit down and shut up if you're white, you can't be racist if you're black sort of discussions, it was either at the very beginning of that becoming popular or maybe even before it. Now we're on the other side of this. Now we've seen the depravity, the insanity that's being proclaimed and taught at these colleges and universities, and people now have a 36% of Americans have confidence in higher education. That's just a little over 1 in 3. But Harry continues here.
Talking about a 36-point drop among Republicans specifically. Get this, 68% of Americans said that higher education was on the wrong track. So it's a question of whether or not people agree with Trump's tactics, but they definitely agree with him on the idea that there is a problem with higher ed overall.
68% of Americans say that higher education is on the wrong track. 68%. That's 2 out of 3 Americans. And 2 out of 3 Americans would be correct here. Higher education is on the wrong track. And why is it on the wrong track? It's on the wrong track because it's being led by leftist lunatics who have abandoned reason, who have abandoned the entire purpose of true and genuine education. They're silencing speech. They are attacking people who believe in conservative principles and values and Christianity. It is definitely on the wrong track. I have to take a break, my friend. Sit tight. Back in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. I want to try to get the rest of this soundbite in because Americans are are realizing more and more that higher education is, as I've called it, one of the 7 pillars of propaganda that has been used by the left to push their morally bankrupt worldview. And I guess you could say ideas, but it's really feelings upon the American student anyway. More and more people realize that I'm not against, people misunderstand, so I'm not against education. First of all, I challenge what you mean by education. Is the only type of education that makes sense is to sit in a classroom with some leftist lunatic talking? Now, I don't think that that's the case. I think that there's lots of ways that people can become educated, certainly through college programs, although I would say it's harder for that today. You could go to community colleges, online courses. You could, my goodness, you could, many people are self-taught. What's wrong with that? Some of the most brilliant people I know are self-taught. They know how to get information. They surround themselves with people that are experts or that have know-how in certain areas, and they pursue knowledge relentlessly, and they educate themselves, and they have no degree to show for it. Cares about the stinking degree. So many people care about these external factors, and I get it. Look, Dad, I've got to get a job. Folks, we've employed people here, and I got to tell you, I'm not the only one who thinks this way. Now, maybe in corporate America it's different, but I want to know that you can do the job. I don't care if you got a 3.2 GPA, a 3.8, a 2.7. I don't care what your grade was in. We had a course at Butler called Change and Tradition. C&T is what it was called back then, what we referred to it as. What does it have to do with anything? Maybe you can see it as a person put forth effort. Are they, trying to apply what they've learned? I don't know. I don't know who the professor was. I don't know what garbage that class was teaching you. I don't know if that professor was opposing you, giving you bad grades because you wouldn't parrot back to that professor what that professor wanted you to say. I don't know. That's my opinions on it. But I want to play as much of this as I can. Before I do that, though, my friends, let me remind you that that spending your money at businesses who turn around and support leftist candidates and leftist causes can be incredibly aggravating, and it presents a real problem. We spend a lot of time trying to promote conservative principles and values, and it can be disheartening to give money to people who then take that money and support something with the money that we gave them, support something that is the antithesis of what we believe in politically. So, if you don't like that sort of environment, if you want to support businesses that will support candidates and causes that you can agree with, then consider Freedom Marketplace. Freedom Marketplace is a free directory of businesses that share your conservative principles and values, businesses that have vowed not to support leftist candidates or leftist causes. There's no login required, no strings attached. It is free. It's just good, patriotic businesses pushing in the same direction that you are. Check it out today, freedommarketplace.net. That's freedommarketplace.net, liberty and business for all. All right, let me play as much of this as I can. I'm not going to get the whole thing in. I'll try my best here.
You've heard from President Trump and many Republican allies for quite some time is accusing colleges and universities across the country of not being a friendly place for conservatives, if you will. How do the American public feel?
Yeah. So, do colleges have a liberal bias? I think that's really the question here. And what we see in polling after polling after polling is that the plurality say yes. Overall, look at that. 45% of Americans overall agree with the idea that colleges have a liberal bias. Just 24% disagree with that idea.
How can you disagree with
Republicans? Hello, 67% of Republicans agree that colleges have a liberal bias. This is why Donald Trump is so emphatic.
So we'll stop there. So overall, 45% of Americans, this is the plurality, so it's not a majority, but it's the biggest group of how people answered this question. 45% agree that colleges have a liberal bias. In the Republican Party, people who identify as Republicans, 2/3, 67% say that they do. I still don't know how this is not well north of 80, 85, even 90% in the Republican Party. Again, I think part of it has to do with an individual's particular college experience. And I understand that. If you went to, like I said earlier, a business school or a certain college or university, or you attended pharmacy school, you might not have been encountering people who were highly politically motivated. But if you took classes at a liberal arts and sciences college at even Butler University, which is where I attended. I also spent a semester at American University. I guarantee you that the people out there are not just a liberal bias. These people are off the charts pushing for people they're wanting to produce. They're wanting an assembly line of little leftists coming out with diplomas. I don't even know how this is remotely close to being arguable one way, the opposite way. But it appears more and more people are coming to this realization that colleges have at least, at the bare minimum, a liberal bias. And at worst, these places are completely focused on, completely dedicated to creating an assembly line of students with diplomas who are coming out as little leftists. So, America is waking up to this. That is a good thing. What's not a good thing is that I have to go, my friends. Have a wonderful day. We'll talk with you soon. SDG.